It's the Central Weekly, a weekly podcast from the Central Podcast Network. Ladies and gentlemen, John Henninger in the podcast.
And Jared LaCrone, as always.
I am super glad to be here. I'm feeling 100%. I'm feeling hundo.
Really?
Yeah, no, I
It's been a long road to this place, Jared.
I don't want to say I was lying last week, feeling great, but I wasn't. I was here. And you're feeling strong.
And
Not
last week,
back-wise, but...
Right, yeah. But last week, was it the second weekend that you had to tap out?
Yeah, well, partial.
Illness?
Yep. So the weekend before, it was Friday, Saturday, and then the weekend, this weekend was Saturday, Sunday.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I feel good. And it's super cool because I just got some good texts like, hey, where's the podcast at? Because we had like a 10 or so day and people were looking for it, and just that's encouraging.
Yeah,
so thank you for everybody that gave us a shout out. It's just, because we want to do things to enrich people and their faith. And I'm glad the Central Weekly is doing a little bit of that. So
yeah, and it's tough to only do it, not as often when literally it's titled The Weekly.
Central Weekly-ish. We changed the title. But hey, speaking of weekly-ish, we're no, it's just weekly. We wrapped up this episode, number 86 of the Central Weekly. We wrapped up number 8 in our fall churchwide series, The Body of Believers, and what a weekend it was. Now, here's the cool thing about this episode in particular, because it deals with the heart, and thus the heart is this weekend Paul Hart. Paul, that's a good. We should.
Wow,
is there a guy named Paul?
There
Hart?
is a guy named Paul Hart. Paul's Hart.
Is Paul's Hart. We're talking to the episode. We're going to have a lot, and we're going to have as our guest Paul and Angie Kirk.
Yeah.
And if you were in service this weekend, you heard his testimony, and now maybe you're buckled in because you want to hear more of it because a lot of details that were not in that video.
Yeah, I mean, I think the initial interview was like 36 minutes long, and so obviously that just for a service format that just doesn't work. So Caden was able to cut that down to a really strong 5. But this is just an opportunity for people to hear that in its entirety. It's long format.
And that's why you might be thinking, hey, this dropped on a Friday night. That's right. We're dropping this episode early just because we wanted to get it out there. So when you reference it in the sermon, people can just go ahead and listen to it this weekend. So that's what you get, people. You had to wait a little bit longer for the weekly last week. 5 days for this one, baby. Yeah. So you're welcome.
Irregularity.
That's what people love about promotion. But I'm so excited about this weekend because we're filming this on a Friday, like I said, or recording. Yeah. Because there's no motion in this
that you know of.
Yeah. I'm not filming anything. But here's the deal. Paul's story is unbelievable. And I think it's a testimony that people need to hear. And it's like, these type of testimonies you hear maybe bits and pieces of through the grapevine of like, oh yeah, this was a healing, or God spoke, or a miracle with this. But you never really get to sit down, hear the story, and really let it soak in and be able to digest it adequately. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'll tell you, I really appreciated the fact that Angie had the presence of mind to start rolling her, start recording as Paul was in this, obviously drugged up, stitched up, broke open. Yeah, I mean, like literally a body that has been through the ringer. But she had the presence of mind to record the things that he was saying, and to know that it wasn't just like in this drug-induced state that he's thinking these things. It was a genuine thought, a genuine experience that carried over, till now. Yeah,
so if you're listening to the Central Weekly early, and you seriously have no idea who's Paul? What were they talking about? You got to go to our YouTube page, youtube.com/centralnow or centralnow.com, hear the lesson, see the video, and then you'll be able to really just work through this, because this is a story that I hope people really pull from a lot of things. But first, let's kind of talk about the series and the sermon.
Sure.
And then we'll get into a little bit more about Paul's story. So week number 8 of our third year of a fall churchwide series.
Right.
And what a churchwide series it was.
What a churchwide series.
Was it your favorite? Say it now.
No.
Your favorite. Which one was your favorite?
I like the leaves.
Really?
Yeah.
I think Fruit Farm was my favorite.
Was it?
Yeah, maybe because it was the original, so it's most endearing to me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But just I really liked Fruits of the Spirit. It's funny how often you reference the Fruit of the Spirit, i.e. this sermon too.
Right.
But I don't know, it was cool. And I love having the tractor.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Understood.
But I loved having all three at the end.
Yeah, I mean this series. It's something, because the challenge with the churchwide series, it has to be something that's communicatable and applicable to every age, right? And so this Body of Believers series works really well because obviously, I mean, kids know mouth, ears, eyes. They know all these body parts, and so it's good to give a spiritual association to your physical. And so, you think more than just, well, my ears are made to hear. My ears are made to hear, but I have got spiritual ears that are made to hear the voice of God.
You know what I'm excited about?
Tell me, Jared.
Not hearing, hey, what body part are we going to talk about at church this weekend? I just think that sounds funny.
Yeah.
I giggle every time. Especially
Why?
When you said doo-doo.
Yeah,
I mean,
I know.
my maturity's not gone that
Mine either. No, I'm just not mature enough to say it.
It's just not. But here's the thing. I liked this, again, because you're right. It really hit hard, I think, with the kids. And I think they were able to really comprehend what it means. And again, we do this so we can have conversations with our kids about this.
Sure.
And not just our kids, but hey, the teenager that's, in your life, or, something like that. It bridges a lot of gaps and starts a lot of conversations.
Right. And the Kid Depot crew did a great job coming up with the card and the mark off and stuff like that. And Alicia, Pacey, I mean, the whole crew, all the way down through, they're used to doing their own curriculum, their own sermon material, all that stuff. So for them to be, put into a place where they have to do a certain thing, they answered the challenge well.
And so this week, this is episode 86, but 8 of the Body of Believers, we looked at the heart. Now, the heart is really neat because you're right, it's a whole body experience when it comes to the heart. Usually, you didn't have the time, and I've seen, and I'm not smart enough to talk about it, but the words that the Bible uses for the word heart is not really your physical heart a lot of times. When it's talking about those
right.
things.
I think a lot of times the Bible is really referring to your mind. However it's referring to it, it's talking about the core of your being, the deepest part of you spiritually.
Yeah, and I think what you had on there, who told you those three? Who did you say it again?
Michael Hyatt from his leadership. He has a leadership blog and a podcast, but called Full Focus. And
probably not as good as ours.
Probably
okay.
not.
He's
he's probably not doing it semi-weekly. But so just I wanted to hit those real quick because I thought the three important things. Your heart is extremely valuable. No wonder you guard it. Your heart is the source of everything you do. That's what the Bible says. And your heart is constantly under attack, which it's under attack because it has great value.
And like you said, when you made the reference to, I think it was Cardinals. I kind of tune out when I hear the word Cardinals.
At Wrigley Field?
No, at Busch Stadium. But it was funny because we went to the game with Mr. John Clark, our buddy, and we went, okay, let's get this. We're going off a tangent here. So John Clark, best guys I know, awesome. He has some season tickets through his business from St. Louis.
Right.
And so we went with him. We always drive in his truck because he's got an awesome manly truck. And I always sit in the back because I'm, so.
Not the bed, but the back seat.
Yeah. But anyways,
sure,
so he goes in there and he parked. Okay, what's the bar restaurant that's really popular right next to where we parked? What is it there? It's on the south side of the ballpark.
I know what you're talking about.
Anyways,
right,
so he literally parks underneath the interstate, under those pillars.
Right.
It seemed totally like we're going to get hijacked. The car's not going to be there when we get back.
Right.
All this stuff. But anyways, where he parked, I think he spent, $30, and that's kind of typical for parking around the ballpark. The way we walk in, though, is the reason I'm bringing this up, is right next to the ball players' parking.
Yes, on that southwest side.
So I knew exactly what
the
you're
stadium.
talking about. Yeah, because if the security guard just was there to keep everybody out, that defeats the purpose of the players only ballpark.
Yeah, that's the thing. If you're not allowing the right players in, then your organization has zero chance of success.
Yeah.
And likewise for our heart. I mean, you can spend all your time keeping stuff out, which is great, but if you're not actively letting the right things in, then your body has zero chance of success.
And that kind of references back to last week when it came to mind, and we talked about this
Much.
mindfulness. A lot of times in our culture today, you hear, you need to be mindful. You need to exit out those negativity, and and that's why I'm talking this way. But really, you're supposed to just let your mind empty your mind of everything. Now, that's great because I think there are a lot of things we need to set aside. We need to have a quiet time. We got to fill it up with the good stuff, though. That's
right.
Or you're just going to be an airhead walking around. Remember airheads? You like airheads?
Airhead. Oh, yeah. So many.
Super good.
Yeah.
But anyways, okay. But I think that's the thing that a lot of people forget. It's almost like, hey, you're not done with the process. Yes, you got centered. Yes, you were able to calm your nerves. The anxiety was able to melt away a little bit. But if you don't fill it up with the positive, you're just like what Jesus says, an empty vessel, just walking around.
Right.
And we need to be filled with the Holy Spirit. So that's time where you get rid of the pollutions, guard your heart, get rid of the bad things, but then let that guard open up to the good things.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. Invite the right things in.
Ooh, that's good.
Fill the limited amount of space that you have.
And here's the thing. You said two things that we need to be on guard about in this in and out process.
I mean, just practical advice for being the kind of guard that a God-honoring heart needs. When you say the kind of guard that a God-honoring, I mean, that's a lot of similar.
I'm amazed. You did some P's last week. I don't even remember what it was. I think it's actually in that reel I made.
Oh, yeah.
But it was a lot of P. I was impressed.
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, hold on, stand by.
Wow.
We need to.
I could probably get it real quick.
It was the paths and the right. Is this what you're talking about?
Paths and the posture.
No.
I'm gonna keep saying P words to try to get you thrown off.
I'll think of it.
Anyways, you're good at that. I think it's the cadence of your rap history growing up.
That's probably what it is. Ganking on
really
demons.
Is.
Yeah.
There's just a solid gangsta foundation there.
Yo,
we might have to explicit this podcast now. But anyways, here's the thing with those two: be attentive and be active.
Yep.
I love that you said another synonym to guard is to occupy.
Isn't that so interesting?
Wow.
I wouldn't have pegged that as a synonym, but just for whatever reason, I, right clicked on guard and looked at synonyms of the word guard, and occupy was one of them, which I feel like is a different. I mean, it's at least it's a different mindset for me if I'm going to occupy something versus guard something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think us as men, that's what we know how to guard stuff. We know how to protect things. So I hopefully that really resonates with the guys in the audience or in the pews this weekend. Now, you said this: filling your heart with right leads to less room for wrong.
Right.
That's a great sentence, John.
Thank you, Jared. Is it complete?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Filling your heart with right leads to less room for wrong. And here's the thing, too. And this has been a struggle of me. A lot of times I would be like, okay, well, I'm not going to do those bad things. But then I would do things that, for example, okay, I don't have a really concrete example, but rather than getting all stressed out, I would just binge The Office. And there's nothing wrong with that. No. I love The Office. Right. We love The Office. Your wife loves The Office.
She really does.
But if that's the only thing I do to kind of veg out and to recuperate and to kind of get my mental health in order, that's not the greatest.
Right.
That's not filling. I'm emptying, but I'm not filling it up. So I think the last couple of years, Maria and I have really tried, especially Maria, has done a good job just filling it up with the right. So you don't have room for the wrong.
Yeah.
And it's almost like when you just go throughout life and you're getting so much positive, godly, Holy Spirit intake, you don't crave the things of this world. And I love you almost brought it out again. You were wanting, you said this, you were wanting to get the big vase out. Fill up with some water,
I almost did it.
Get some orange ping pong balls.
Yep.
People are going crazy because they know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
What series was that from? Was that from Fruit Farm?
I don't know. That's a great question.
I'm gonna have to do some research on that one.
I really don't remember, but I mean,
Michael Todd.
Had I've been
my
able,
favorite pastor of all time, Michael Todd.
Had I've been able to, he is good. Had I've been able to maybe come up with something that I liked as much as that,
I gave you something you didn't like as much.
It wasn't as much. Yeah, no. I didn't like it as much. As if I would have been able to come up with something that I liked as much as that, then I probably would have done something visual there. But I like that one a ton.
Because it's right. Because those ping pong balls weren't all crazy sinful things, right?
Right.
They were good things, but I think that we need to fill it up with great things that God's calling us to fill it up with. Don't you think? I think so. I like this series. I like this sermon. I like that we ended this series with this sermon because it was just
kind of a wrap up.
Yeah, it was a good wrap up, but it wasn't just a wrap up.
No,
I don't want
no.
you to think that either. I don't think other people did, because we have to be people that are reminded of things a lot, and we have to hear it a lot. And so this to kind of just almost incorporate the whole 8 weeks, and then with a big exclamation point with Paul's story. And again, that's the great thing. I tell Paul this, it's like we gave him this story,
right?
To like, hey, can we talk about your heart?
Yeah,
and,
right.
Because we're talking about heart. And also, can you do a little push for Kid Depot? Because we really need volunteers. It's like, no, we did not make this up. God orchestrates things for the good of those who know him.
Sure.
And I just, here's the thing that I'm impressed with by Paul is his humility. And Angie too. She's there by his side through this. And I think I don't want people to underestimate this while we're just talking about Paul and his heart and how God spoke to Paul. Angie, though, has just been there the whole time, ready to tell this story right alongside him. And I'm grateful. I love that final part of that video where he goes, I wish I had a voice to sing so I could sing his praises. Yeah. And again, you don't have to have a great voice to sing. No. But I just love the heart there. Yeah, and that just displays his heart. Yep. And if you're a guy that is getting involved with kids at that age and telling them about Jesus, it takes a special heart to do that. Yeah. But I think a lot of people don't feel they have that conditioned heart. I think you do. So I think it's a both challenging and inspirational story and sermon. So.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to these folks hearing it in its full version, the uncut version.
The uncut,
slightly cut version. It's also interesting, which, so Paul said that the two things he remembered hearing was, right, like stay involved in Kid Depot. Yeah. And
read Acts.
Right.
Yeah.
And just interestingly enough, who are we introduced to in the book of Acts?
Yeah, I know. Paul.
Yeah.
And Paul's his new name, not his old name. I think it's by no accident that God said that to him. It's super cool. And I think, too, a lot of people are like, oh, he was drugged up or he probably that wasn't. I don't want people just to throw that aside as well, because a lot of times it takes something to, like, just kind of like the mind being too full. It takes a mind being, I don't want to say emptied again. That's not the right word. But you know what I'm trying to say?
Yes.
To cut through the distractions, to get Paul to listen. And again, God didn't cause all this, but I'm just saying God showed up in that moment because he knew Paul was going to be able to receive that. For sure. And so that's another challenge to us is, are you at a posture? Is your heart right to receive what God's trying to tell you? So, yeah. So let's throw it to Paul and Angie. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay. So we're going to throw it to them. And then guess what?
What?
We haven't done this in a while. We asked Paul and Angie the question that we ask all of our guests in the Central Weekly, except the last 7 weeks. How has God been working in your life lately? So not only do you get to hear Paul and Angie's story, you get to hear exactly what God is telling them right now. So
that's great.
Here is their story. And we're back with the Central Weekly, episode 86, and I'm excited because it's been a couple weeks since we've had guests in the podcast studio, and guess what? This is going to be a great conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got Paul and Angie Kirk. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
Paul and Angie, if you were in service this weekend, you have heard their story, and man, is it a good one. The emotional roller coasters that this video sent you through was crazy, and I know that you guys lived it.
Yes,
so it's crazy because really I heard Jon was going to be doing this. We're going to talk a lot about Paul's literal heart while we talk about the heart in our Body of Believers series. And really, it's such a great way to cap this off because we say relationships matter, and this is relationships matter at its finest because it's such a personal story for you guys. And I think it's going to hit home. Now, we're recording this prior to the weekend because really, you guys did this video, and probably the video was about 5 minutes when people watched it. But to me, I got to see the shots that didn't make it on the cutting room floor. I don't think they really have cutting room floors anymore in the digital age. But Caden did such a good job with the video, really telling the heart of the story.
Awesome.
And really just, especially at the end. And we're going to get more into that. But reason I brought you in, because there's so much left. And I just wanted people to really hear the whole thing in its entirety. So the podcast is the perfect platform to do that. And I'm just just so thankful that you guys decided to come in a second time, to come into the Central and tell your story. So, Paul and Angie Kirk, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having us.
I think people are really going to attach to this. First of all, because a lot of people have had situations with family members that have gone this way.
Yes.
And maybe not have gone as great as it has gone for you, Paul.
Right.
But really, to hear God speak, people need to know that. And those, like we talk about, we have to be sharing our testimonies.
Yes.
And again, I'm going to stop talking so I can get out of the way
Yes.
here. So, Paul and Angie Kirk,
Yes.
here we go. This is super cool because really, I got introduced to you guys by praying for you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
This is sad because did you guys volunteer when Maria was children's pastor?
No, I think it was just since Phoebe. Yeah.
So then I've just been kind of out of that world, so I
Yeah.
didn't get to meet you guys
Yes,
really.
yes.
But we started chatting, Angie, just via text.
Yes.
You were an avid texter, just saying, "Hey, you need to pray." And
Yes.
I would hear prayer requests coming from Kid Depot. When we would do staff prayer times, and
Yes.
and so really that's my first really recollection of who Paul and Angie Kirk are
Yeah.
via
Yeah.
text, which that's a lot for me on my
Yeah.
side. So
Yeah.
that happens a lot. So I want you to start. Give us a foundation. Paul and Angie Kirk. Who are you? How long you've been in the area? When did you guys get married? Tell us a little bit about the kids. Give us a foundation of who you guys are.
Well, we met in high school. Started dating when Angie was a freshman. I was a junior.
We were high school sweethearts.
We've been together now for 37 years coming up.
Oh, wow.
Married for 33. And we have 2 daughters.
Okay.
Kristen and Kaylee. One granddaughter, Isabella.
Oh, she's spoiled.
Not
Just
at all.
a little.
Not at all. So,
But we actually met at Boyd Christian Church.
we did.
yeah,
Yes,
okay.
we
When
did.
I was like 13. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't, it's been a while since I thought back to that, but yeah,
Yeah, that's where we actually met.
this is
Boyd.
true. And that is where we got married also.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so both grew up in the area.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're both from Mount Vernon area.
Okay.
I was
Mount Vernon, Woodland.
originally I'm from Lincoln, Illinois, is where I was born.
yeah.
Grew up in Hartsburg till I was 11.
Okay.
We moved down here. My mother's family was from Mount Vernon. And I guess my father was from Mount Vernon also, but my mother and father were divorced at that time.
Okay.
So I moved down here with my mother and stepfather.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's really nice how
Yeah.
this
you
worked
haven't
out.
ran into Chris Curry, have you?
Pardon
Because
me?
Chris Curry, one of our elders.
No.
He's probably, gosh, he's not gonna like that I'm guessing his age. He's probably early 40s, but he's from Lincoln as well.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, Lincoln, I mean, being in a Christian church, Lincoln always kind of cross paths.
Absolutely.
It
a
does.
lot of
Yeah.
times.
Lincoln Christian College is very, very,
Yeah.
very
So 2
common.
girls,
Yes.
one
Two girls,
granddaughter.
Yep. One
Yes.
granddaughter, yep.
And then how did you start coming to Central?
So I started actually watching Central online back before 2015.
Oh, gosh.
And yeah, so I just kind of started getting a little bit more. I've kind of bounced around from church to church a lot, but Central just really drew my eye. And then once Paul had his aortic dissection in 2015 and survived that miraculously, we just both invested ourselves into coming here and getting involved, and God just really pointed the way
Yeah.
after that event.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that drew me in is John's singing.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's incredible.
Absolutely.
That's usually what happens.
Absolutely incredible. I mean, I could listen to that man sing 24/7.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people do.
Yes.
And so
figure out a
when he changed roles, I was like, man, what's that going to do for the church? And he's as good a preacher as he is a singer.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, it hasn't hurt a thing. Actually, it's he's just a great preacher as well. So
Yeah.
Now, so when you guys started coming, did you get right involved with Kid Depot? at
Not
first?
right away.
Not right away.
I think it was a time when they were calling for
Yeah.
volunteers,
Yeah.
and God just laid it on my heart. I've always loved working with children, so
Yeah.
God just really laid it on my heart to get involved,
Yeah.
and I started doing that. And Paul he's always been so great with kids, and he said, I think I'll just come with you. So it was Rachel Marlowe I was talking to at
Yeah.
the time, and she
Love
said,
her.
sure, he can, so he actually filled out his paperwork, and we started serving together. So
yeah,
I bet really they were probably more excited for you, Paul, to start than Angie. No offense, but
Well-
when
Yes,
the guy signed
yes.
up for Kid Depot, this
and
is
the
like gold.
kids just jumped to him.
yeah. It's like I told her. I said it's rough having 11 kids hanging on you
Oh, yeah.
right right now. Right before I had surgery, I was like, I don't know if we can keep doing this, but we can, and we will, and we are.
Absolutely.
We're back on the list.
And I love that's really where this story is going to push us. So, Paul, take us to 2015. Take us to, I think, if I'm right, you're eating some ramen at the break room.
Eating some ramen noodles. January 2nd, 2015 at Nascode Industries. I took a bite, swallowed it, and it felt like something punched me in the chest like nothing I'd ever felt. And the guys sitting at the table are all like, you all right? I'm like, man, I don't know. That hurt pretty bad. And then it just felt like something ripped me in half, like a piece of paper just tore right down the middle. And I almost went out. I got real pale. And I said, I need some air. This is January 3rd. It's probably 5 degrees outside. They wheeled me in my chair over to the door, opened it up, and I mean, sweat's just pouring off. And one of the guys, Rod McCoy, was sitting there, and he goes, Paul, I'm going to call the ambulance. I said, yeah, I think you should. I worked at that ambulance service as part-time. I was a medic for 18 years until January 2nd, 2015. That was the last of that. But anyway, the ambulance comes, and we run a bunch of tests, and everything looked all right, as far as 12 leads and blood pressure and everything was okay. And I said, it's letting up a little bit. I think I'm going to go back in. And one of my guys in the ambulance that says a partner of mine, he's like, how many times you been in the back of this ambulance? I said, hundreds. He goes, how many times you been on that stretcher in the ambulance? And we were trying to determine which hospital to go to and what code to run. And I said, let's go Good Sam in Mount Vernon. And the medic driving, he's like, what code do we run? As far as take our time, patient's probably all right, or hurry. And the medic in the back looked at me, and I said, run it hot. He's like, let's go. I mean, then, of course, the fear on their face that kind of matched what I was feeling. So we hurried to Mount Vernon. I sent my wife a text from my phone. The ambulance service, whenever they would tone out a call, it'd go to every medic's phone. Okay. And I sent her that. And, of course, the call was a 43-year-old male possibly having a heart attack.
Yeah, that's how I found out.
So that was how she found out that I was on my way to the hospital.
Wow.
Nobody else ever got that. That's a one-person thing,
Wow.
So we all get to Good Sam, and my whole family's there, which is kind of concerning me, But I didn't let it bother me at the moment. But it just, whenever you look in a room and your whole family's there, you're like, well, how bad am I? Yeah. So we were doing tests. The doctor finally came in. He says, we have an elevated D-dimer, which is a marker for blood clots in your lung. So he says, I think we're on to something. We're going to do a CT scan. Took me to the CT scan. We came back to the emergency room, and the bed didn't even feel like it stopped shaking, and he was in there, the doctor. And he's like, we figured it out. And I said, well, that's good. He goes, no, that's not good. He says, you're the most critical person in this hospital. You need to be in the operating room immediately. He said, I've called the surgeon, and we're going to see if we can get you in right now. They had just started a procedure on another patient. The only doctor in the hospital that could operate on me was going to be quite some time. He said, pick another hospital, St. Louis or Springfield. Well, this is a familial problem. My father had aneurysms and my brother had aneurysms. Both had open heart surgery in Springfield. Both lived. Yeah. I said, let's do Springfield. Okay. Doctor comes back in about 2 minutes later. He says, the arch is not flying or AVAC's not flying. He says, pick one in St. Louis. I said, let's do SLU. I've heard great things. I know we've taken a lot of people there. Most of them I see again later, so I know SLU's a great hospital. So he goes, what ambulance service you want to take? Yes. Well, Washington County, the ones that brought me. He came back in there about 2 minutes later. He says, they're almost to Nashville. I know where they're at. He says, Litton's is here. You're going with them. Yeah. I was like, okay. So make a long story short, Litton's takes me over to SLU, straight to the operating room. Yeah. Now, like I said, 18 years I've been on ambulance. I have never taken a patient from a hospital to another hospital's operating room, always to the ER or a regular room. Yeah. So,
and you're still coherent of what's going on.
Yes.
Hey, I'm going here. They're asking you. Wow.
I know I knew I had an aortic dissection. He come in and told us, and I knew what that was. Yeah. Not to the extent that I know what it is now, because we've done a lot of research. Right. Yeah. But I knew what it was, as far as a basic term. And we get over there, and it looked like a scene from Bruce Almighty. The only person in the whole operating area is a guy with a buffer cleaning the floor. Oh, and I'm like, where'd you guys bring me? And a couple minutes later, the surgeon came out. It's just at that time I was the only person in that
you were
area.
just the first
So
one.
it was kind of strange, but she came out and asked if my family was near. I said I would assume. We didn't exactly fly over here. We drove kind of slow, in my opinion. But anyway, we got there.
I love this ambulance guy. He knows what he's doing.
He's not cutting him any slack.
So anyway, my family gets there, and just a few minutes later, it felt like all of them, including my brother this time, who is no longer with us. But my wife had picked him up on the way, and I mean, my whole family was there now. And the surgeon's like, "I'm gonna do all I can for him," and I was like, well, that's not exactly what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear, you guys can see him again here in a couple hours.
Yeah.
But so you can tell what. They told
So
you.
before I left Good Sam in Mount Vernon, they were letting me know how serious it was, and I know Dr. Kennedy, who was the ER doctor, then he stopped me before I walked out and said, "Now I just want you to be prepared that your husband's probably not going to be alive when you get over there." And he said, "If you have any affairs to get in order," he says, "you need to get them in order."
So what was that? I mean, what was that like?
I just
Traveling? Were you by yourself? Who were you with?
My brother-in-law was with me, but I just remember looking at that doctor and thinking, but God, you know, but God. So I wasn't giving up that easy.
Yeah.
But
And obviously that surgery went fine. I don't know how long that surgery took.
that was an 8-hour surgery.
8-hour surgery.
So they repaired the aortic dissection.
They repaired a section of it.
Okay.
My aortic dissection started.
Okay.
At this time, it started about to use a measurement, we'll say a couple inches above my heart, and went through my entire aorta down into both my legs.
Yeah.
So basically,
So he ripped all the way down.
It ripped open, and then the blood goes into the hole that just opened up, and it pushes the inner layer of your aorta to form another hole or another lumen. So now my aorta has 2 lumens. And as that blood is going down your aorta, at some point in time, it has to come back out. So it goes to however far it can go to find a weak spot, and then it blows back out. So now I've got two tubes that make up my aorta instead of one. Typically, I mean, most people don't survive that.
Right.
Mainly
That's what I'm amazed
because
by.
Only
mainly,
a 10% chance
That just what you
surviving it.
Oh, wow.
That's the
event
odds.
of the event. And then when they did my surgery, we asked the surgeon later, and how bad is it? How bad was it? She goes, well, you were millimeters from death. If the flap would have covered the artery instead of just partially, no blood could have got through it, and that's why most people don't make it. Yeah, I mean, it's just the event, the flap itself typically is a bad problem. Another thing is that dissection can go into any of your arteries. It can go up into your brain. It could go into your kidneys. It could go once it's tearing, it's going to go till it finds a spot.
So
out.
it's kind of a blessing. That's
Yes.
a weird word to say
No,
right
it
now,
is a blessing.
that it went that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
It missed all his it missed his renal arteries. It missed going up into his brain. The way that tear happened, it missed all the way down. It missed all of the major.
And
it's just a miracle.
It started above my carotid arteries, or coronary arteries, sorry.
Okay.
If it blocks one of your coronary arteries, you only got 2 going to your entire heart. So that would probably be
I mean, that's just a crazy
event.
thing to think about. Miracles within a health disaster. I would call
Absolutely.
this a health disaster.
It was a health disaster.
But yet there's
that's a
miracles
good word.
to let it still be
Yes.
you alive.
Yes.
Right. And to be in that 10%.
Yes.
I mean, so many people just throw it out, oh, God wasn't in that because you went through that medically. No, God was in that.
God was
exactly.
definitely in that.
He's been in all of this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the
And
8-hour surgery, that corrected,
that
what did they tell you after?
That they resuspended my aortic valve.
Okay.
And I still had a small aneurysm, but there's only so much they could do. I was already 8 hours under, and that surgery was to save my life. It wasn't to necessarily correct.
Yeah. Okay.
And she told us when she was done, before I ever left the hospital, she goes, "You're going to need more surgeries. I can't tell you when. It could be next week, next month. It could be 20 years." Wow. She goes, "But if you live long enough, you're going to need more surgeries because my aorta is not very good."
Yeah.
So, there's every heartbeat puts pressure on it, and therefore, it just stands to reason you're going to have more problems.
Yeah.
So the problem that I developed over that next 8+ years was I had a small aneurysm directly above my heart.
Okay. Yep.
That turned into a large aneurysm. It went to 5.8 centimeters. If one had a normal aorta is around 3.5 centimeters to give put it into a perspective.
People that love medical jargon are going to love this
that.
episode.
Yes.
So to put that into perspective, it's 5.8 centimeters, which is, a baby's head at birth is usually about 10 centimeters. So it's very large.
Yeah.
And that aneurysm being close to my heart was keeping my aortic valve from being able to close.
Okay.
So therefore, when my heart would beat, the blood would head out and a lot of it would come back because the valve can't close to keep that blood from coming back.
Yeah.
So that was the problem it was causing. And it got to a point to where at about 6 centimeters, you expect an aneurysm to bust. And that's in somebody who's had open heart surgery. Yeah. If you've never had open heart surgery, they wouldn't like that number to get above 5 centimeters. But scar tissue is stronger than our standard body.
Really?
So with scar tissue,
sermon right there.
Yeah, it's something. It was kind of neat. A cardiologist is like, if you've never had a surgery, I'd say we need to do it at 5, but I'm going to let you go to 6 because you have. And so he explained it to us, and that was what our surgeon told us also. She goes, one of the biggest challenges for me is I got to get through all that scar tissue before I can ever even get to what I got to work on. And she goes, it's a challenge, but she was up to it. Dr. Cashrew is my surgeon, and she's amazing. I mean, she is. And she just, every doctor that knows her says, man, you got a good one when you get her.
Cool.
So
take me back a little bit.
Okay.
After the surgery, what's life like after that? Are you going back to work? I don't want to say you're a ticking time bomb, but the doctors probably said you can't do this, can't do that.
Absolutely.
What was that like?
But, really the only thing that they tell me is don't ever strain. Don't lift anything that would cause you to have to hold your breath. Okay. Do not push because, if you're straining, you're putting a great deal of pressure on your vessels. Yeah. And that's the main thing I had to avoid. So they put me on a 50-pound weight restriction. Okay. And just said, don't strain. That's pretty much a lot of medication, of course. Yeah. Keep my blood pressure very low. Yeah. Pulse as low as we can. Yeah. Yeah. But that was pretty much it. I mean, it was like, okay, every 6 months we'll do a scan, and when it gets to this number, we'll address it. So
2022, it got to that number.
Yes.
Basically, routine CT scan.
Yeah.
Every
and then they saw
months.
it then. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was getting close to. It was to a number to where the doctor's like, if it keeps you up at night, we'll schedule a surgery. Yeah. Because he says it's there. You're within the criteria. Mm-hmm. But he said, I don't feel like it's emergent at this time. It's just kind of your decision. Yeah. So we talked about it, and with my wife being a crop insurance agent, was like, when's the best time for you to? When will you have 8 weeks to help take care of me? So we felt that this was probably end of August was a good date, early September. So I chose August 29th, and the hospital called me on the 26th and said, hey, we've had to move your date. I'm like, okay. So we're moving it to the 31st. I'm like, okay, well, that's just 2 days, but I had already had my work time scheduled off and everything. It's just a big mess, but we got it all straightened out. So we show up over there on the 31st at Barnes. All my doctors now are at Barnes. And the procedure itself should have been something that I should have probably noticed this. But the very first thing they do when I get there and I'm getting prepped for surgery is they put an arterial line in my wrist. Okay. And it's a doctor who does this. Mm-hmm. So this doctor and her associate come over with a machine. They're looking at my wrist, getting this to get this line in. And there's another doctor at the foot of my bed that's talking to me about something else. And she looked over at the lady putting the line in my wrist, and she goes, other way. And so we just kind of look at each other, and I'm watching her, and I'm watching my wrist a little bit. And she talks a couple more minutes. She goes, excuse me. The other way. the doctor's pushing this needle in the wrong way in my wrist or something.
my
and I'm
gosh.
like, okay, so
This
my
is
wife,
gonna go great.
Yeah.
this is the very
I'm
first
assured.
Yeah,
We're
right.
5:30 in the morning and barely awake, and and I'm
Yeah.
hearing the other way. So my wife and daughter are both to my side. The doctor does get the line in, but as she's screwing the cap on, I guess she missed the catheter part of the line. So as soon as she let go of the cap, it went flying, and blood's just squirting out of my wrist. And I see my daughter over there shaking about 3 times and getting ready to go down, and I'm like, oh, this is just not starting off great.
No.
Everything worked out. I
Yeah.
made it to the operating room and made it through the operation.
Yeah.
Well, that's a story in itself.
That's a story. That is a story.
Angie,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So yeah. So his surgery was only supposed to last about 4-ish hours, 4 to 6 hours, 6 max. They told me, they said if he's in there 8, because at first we thought it was going to be an 8-hour surgery. We had our wires crossed, and
Yeah.
she was like, now if he's in there 8 hours, you need to worry.
This is the nurse practitioner
Yeah.
for the surgeon.
So come to find out, he was in there 8 hours. So I didn't know what was going on at
Yeah.
that point. But apparently what had happened was when they were getting him hooked up, trying to get him on the heart and lung bypass machine, they were cutting through everything and getting ready to start. And they started pushing the medicine to stop his heart.
Yeah.
And it was at that moment she caught his coronary artery was dissecting on the table.
You're kidding.
And if they hadn't have caught that, he would have died instantly, because that would have been instant death, and they would not have had time to get him on the heart and lung bypass machine. So he would have died if she had not had seen that happening as she was pushing that medication. So another miracle there. I mean, he really... His tissues are that fragile that just pushing that medication caused his coronary to dissect. So that's what took 8 hours. So that was.
There was a doctor from Atlanta who was in the surgery as a student, so to speak. I mean, he is a surgeon.
Yeah.
And he came in and seen us in the room, I guess it was probably 2 or 3 days after surgery.
Yeah.
And he goes, he says, I couldn't believe it. He says, I don't know why she even looked. He says she's that good.
Yeah.
He says, I got a feeling if it had been anybody else, this
they
wouldn't have went this way.
Right. Yes.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, that's another doctor telling me that basically, something probably caused her to look.
Yeah.
Or maybe she does every time, I don't know, but she caught it. And that tells me that there's other people in the room.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely.
So here's my favorite part of the story.
Yes.
How did God speak after surgery?
Very clearly.
Done. Love it.
I was in ICU, unable to breathe. The pain was off the chart. I mean, I just couldn't believe something could hurt as bad as this was hurting. I couldn't take a breath. Every breath I just felt like it was my last one. And it got to a point where I was getting very concerned about, am I going to get another breath? So I called out. I said, Jesus, either take me home or help me.
Yeah.
And he come into my room, stood by my bed, and he said, I've got you. And it felt like the next breath was easier than the one before it. And the next one was easier than that one. And shortly after that, they pulled the chest tubes out, the drain tubes out of my chest, which creates room for your lungs to move.
Yeah.
And it just got even better. It was easier and easier. And then I had these 2 floaters in my vision. And when I would close my eyes, they would come together and look like Jesus. And I'm like, he was with me the whole time. All I had to do was close my eyes, because those floaters were bothering me when I was awake.
Yeah.
But as soon as I'd close my eyes, I was like, wait a minute. And at some point in time, early on in this, I don't know why, but for some reason I asked God, I said, do I need to continue in Kid Depot? It's just something that was weighing on me. It's so difficult sometimes when there's 2 of us and there's 12 plus kids, 3, 4, 5 years old, and
we're not young.
and we're not exactly in our 20s anymore. And it was like, I just don't know if maybe I need to step away from that
And you were thinking this prior to the surgery.
Yes.
I must have. I must have, because it was like the first question that came to my mind.
Yeah.
And God clearly said to me, "No, I want you to stay in Kid Depot." Yeah. I'm like,
And this was the first thing he told me when he woke up.
yeah, I was like, man, first of all, it amazes me that the first thing I think of when I wake up from
because
from
Angie, you had
open-heart
to be
surgery.
surprised at that too.
I was completely surprised.
Okay, so of all the things that he could have told you,
Yes.
he tells you about volunteering.
He was
at
very,
church.
very direct
Yeah.
that he wants Paul to continue in Kid
Yes.
Depot.
I mean, and
So that's
basically,
just amazing.
Yeah.
I mean, God told me it makes him happy.
Yes.
That I'm doing this.
Yes.
And I was like, it just blows my mind still that that's the, I had God's ear, and that's what I asked him. Do I continue in
That's
Kid
what you
Depot?
tell me.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean that's the answer I needed. And obviously we are back on the schedule.
Yes,
and we'll be
absolutely.
returning in next month.
Yeah, it was super cool. Before you went into that, you knew that was on the schedule for
Yes.
a long time. I was praying, but it was really cool to hear the stories coming from Kid Depot about the kids praying.
No.
And just hearing about just from a volunteer standpoint too, but knowing that the little kids that
Yes.
knew, some are probably a little bit older now,
Yes.
that knew you, especially I think Ashton's age crew, they were
Okay.
some of your first kids.
Yeah.
So just to hear that and just hear the church coming together to pray for miracles, and
Yes.
you got them.
And we felt them.
Oh,
We
definitely.
definitely felt
And
them.
I told her several times, I said, I can tell that God was answering.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, there would be days that everything hurts so bad.
Yeah.
And then it'd be like, I just feel a little better today. And I know it's because prayers are being answered, you know?
Tell them what Jesus told you.
Yeah, Jesus, he told me he's got me, but he also told me in another session, he said, I want you to read the book of Acts, and I want you to live your life like that, like the book of Acts. And I'm like, book of Acts. So I came to church, I talked to Jon and James, and I'm like, what do you guys think that meant? What do you think that means? Well, James handed me the book of Acts. Conveniently, they have just the book of Acts by itself. So I took that, I read it, and what always jumps out to me as I'm reading that story is how Saul become Paul, and Jesus says, I want you to preach about me. I want you to tell the world about me.
Yeah.
And I read it in there, I bet you five different times in there. And I'm like, I think that's what he means. He means that he needs me to make sure everybody knows that he is a big part of this reason that I'm still sitting here.
Absolutely.
And I need to make sure people know that.
Yeah.
And that's part of the reason that I went to Jon and I said, man, is there any way we can get this word out?
Yeah.
And he did what he's doing. And then this podcast, I mean, I just love that we have a platform that that we can reach people.
Yeah.
And if there's anybody who's maybe just on the fence and like, man, I just need some sort of assurance that God's real, here it is. I
think we need to be clear here. Jesus had never spoken to you prior to this.
Not
You did not-
in plain voice.
And you did not search after this.
No.
In this instance.
No.
And I think people need to know that. People think that this is only for people that are having these mountaintop experiences or people that are super close to God. And no,
absolutely
like
not.
you're a common guy that went
Exactly.
through something miraculous.
Yes.
And God spoke to you in that state.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
When you were probably better to listen than at any other time in your life.
And I wonder,
ready to listen.
I wonder myself if that is why
Yeah.
I heard him so clearly is because I called out and I shut up. And I don't normally do either one of those things on a normal basis. So I really think that maybe, and then James did his service about listening. And I'm like, man, it just fits. Like you said, I was the most prepared to listen because I needed it. I needed to hear him. And he made sure I did.
Well, the crazy thing is this story isn't done, and I think we're gonna talk a little bit about this in our next segment. But I think we need to say too, the Book of Acts is a story of how evangelism breeds transformation, and that's exactly what has happened in your life: the transformation, the heart transformation,
Absolutely.
physically and spiritually.
Yes.
definitely.
But gosh, it's so neat how God shows up every time you need Him to.
Yes.
He does.
And a lot of times, maybe not the ways that you thought. You didn't think He was going to talk about Kid Depot.
Absolutely not.
And it sounds like we're like paying you to tell this story. Because it's like,
sound that way.
what do we need right now? Volunteers. Well, let's get Paul out here with his heart story.
Hey, if
Gosh.
this doesn't get him, I don't know what will.
Well, it's just, and again, it's it's just amazing how practical God is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like we think that he only shows up in these monumental, I mean, you had a monumental
Right.
story,
Right.
but it was so practical in what he did tell you.
Absolutely.
Read the book of Acts. How practical is that?
Right.
And it gives you testimonies,
Yes.
a book full of testimonies about how God spoke, people listened, and there was transformation.
Yes.
Exactly.
Gosh, what a cool thing.
Yeah, because
Yes.
he walked away from it. He's
Yeah.
not super familiar with the Bible,
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
and he was looking at me like, "What's in the Book of Acts?"
Yeah.
I wasn't completely.
Right.
I wasn't completely. I didn't know,
Yeah.
you know, honestly either. And so it was very interesting when we sat down with John and James, and James was like,
And it's
first thing he comes to is the Saul turn into Paul, and you know, it's
Yeah.
just crazy.
Yeah.
and the start of churches in general. I mean, basically that was, you know, everything was Moses' law prior to this, and Jesus is like, hey, I'm the Son of God. I died and resurrected for you.
Yeah.
Make sure people know this. And I
Yeah.
kind of, that's what I think I need to be doing. Yep.
We're not done yet.
Okay.
So we're going to take a little break. And then this is exciting because we haven't done this in a while. We are going to ask you the question that we ask all of our guests on Essential Weekly. How has God been working in your life lately? And we're asking it to the both of you. So we'll
Okay.
start with Paul. And then I want to also hear how God has been working lately in Angie's life. So we're going to take a quick break, take a breath, and we'll be right back. And we're back to wrap up our conversation with Paul and Angie Kirk. And gosh, it's been a good one so far. But it's like I knew there's something left on and if you were here this weekend, you knew there was something left on this conversation. So we're gonna hear now, Paul and Angie, how has God been working in your life lately?
Well, I think the obvious for me is I'm healing. I'm healing rapidly. I'll be returning to work at NASCO next week.
Okay.
And that's something 6 weeks ago I'd have said, I don't know if we've had the discussion. I don't know if I'll ever be well enough to go back to work, but now I am. And,
Good.
and also, I mean, like I said, obvious the healing, obvious the survival in general. But I also feel like, you know, Jesus is just telling me, God's telling me this isn't over. Yeah, you've survived, but now you got to get out and tell this story.
Yeah.
And it just, I mean, God works in my life all the time. I mean, he has to because it was a wreck and it has been for a long time. But I actually, people say, man, how do you feel now that you've had all this? I said, well, as a person, I don't feel much different. My spirituality has changed a great, great deal.
Yeah.
And, it's hard to put into words. This has been a roller coaster that has been, I mean, so full of pain and suffering, but it was short-lived. And now the story can go on and on and on. And, you know, it's like I told her, if I had to take some pain to get people to believe in Jesus, I'll do it again. I mean, if it gets people to listen and know that God and Jesus are real, I mean, obviously, I mean, I'm a maintenance technician at work, so I am very literal on things. So hearing the stories in the Bible, when you just hear them as, we'll say layman's terms, just sitting there listening, stories, they're hard to believe. But once you get the faith, man, they get a lot easier to believe in.
Exactly.
And, you know, there's still so many people that are like, you know, God's not real, Jesus is not real. Well, he's not to you yet, but maybe someday you'll see. And once you do, and once you feel it, you'll feel different, much different.
What really brought you to that decision of baptism?
I just felt that I was baptized as a child.
Yeah.
And I still remember what I told the church, because back then when the church we went to, you had to give a little speech before you got baptized. Yep. And I remember ending with, I just want to be a better boy. Oh. And they took me back, dunked me, and, you know, that was it. And I'm like, I feel like I am a born again Christian. And I feel like I was born again last month and the month before. I mean, it's just, and Jesus coming and speaking to me has told me that, boy, it's time. This is real. The best way to let him know you're listening is to reaffirm in Christ that, you know, that you believe, because I can say anything I want until people see that I believe and I say it out loud. It's just smoke and mirrors.
Yeah.
So I'm wanting to make it real. I'm wanting everybody to see that this isn't a story that we just concocted. It's real, and I just feel like baptism is the best way to confirm it.
I mean, it's the most beautiful expression of our first step of faith.
Absolutely.
And for you to say, hey, I understand that this is so real. I'm taking this beautiful expression and because I believe it, and I want other people to witness and to bear testimony to what God's done in my life.
Right.
It's awesome. And I'm excited too. Just there's some specific reasons that you're called to Kid Depot as you, Paul, because I don't know the future men that stayed because they had fun in Kid Depot and that really grew in that relationship. I mean, we don't know those stories on this side of heaven.
Right.
I'm excited to learn about those later.
Yes.
Right.
They'll point to, hey, I saved a guy on an operating table so you could hear about Jesus when you were a kid.
Yes.
Those stories. That's
Yeah.
going to be something we're just going to
Yes.
be I feel like in heaven we're just going to have our mouths wide open all the
Yes.
time.
Yes.
In awe. So, but Angie, this is
Yes.
important too.
Yes.
I want to ask you this question.
Yes.
How's God been working in your life lately? Because you've been on, I'm going to put my fingers, the sidelines.
Yeah.
But not really.
Yeah, not really.
Just literally not on the table. But you've gone through this. This has been something.
Yeah.
How, first two, a little bit about how have you seen Paul change and what has God done in your life?
Gosh, I have seen Paul change. He's always been a good man. I never want to say Paul has ever been a bad man because he has always been such a good man. And anyone that knows him knows this. He will give the shirt off his back. But I did pray a lot for a more godly man, a more godly husband. I just wanted him to grow in his relationship with God. And I've prayed about that through most of our marriage because he's always been a good guy, but he's just not been really close to God. And it's just seeing the fruition of all the prayers I prayed as his wife all these years. I would say something I have taken away from this is never giving up faith, because I can remember from the time we were at Good Sam and they were telling me he wasn't going to live, and I kept thinking, but God. That was the two words that kept going in my head. And then in his surgery, and I can remember the surgeon saying, we'll do all we can. But I could tell by her look on her face that it wasn't looking good. And I can remember just literally laying Paul at God's feet during that entire surgery and just praying. And I knew I had to be okay with God, no matter the outcome, whether it be good or bad, whether it was an outcome I desired or not, that it was going to be his will. And I had to be okay with that. And that's hard for a lot of people to do, but I was going to be okay. But thankfully, he lived through it, and I kept the faith through this. We were looking death down the barrel of the gun throughout this whole thing too. And we got him home, and 24 hours later, he went into septic shock. And had to be choppered back out. He was dying again. He turned blue in front of me. I had to call 911. I mean, God was not done with him.
It's just amazing because my family's been through a lot of health stuff with my sister and
Yes.
My grandma, and just it seems like just life just deals a lot of this to you. But for you to have the faith and say, "But God,"
Yes.
I think, gosh, I'm gonna mess up this quote about where reality ends and our hope begins. That's what faith is. Like for you to hear your reality, but understand that God is going to get in that reality and push you in a direction that you might not even know yet.
Right.
That's faith.
Yes.
Because you didn't see survival. You saw only death, and even more like, wow, he's septic shock. Okay, we're doing this again.
Right.
That could bring even more doubt, or even more like, wow, why are you doing this to me again?
Right.
A lot of doubt. But for that to just, again, go back to the faith of saying, but God,
Right.
you're going to get in this, though.
Absolutely.
And I think that's just a challenge I hope a lot of people take from this story.
Yes.
That the reality might be what it is.
Right.
But God is going to bring his reality into that
Absolutely.
situation. And I think we just need to stand back and be ready.
Absolutely.
So, gosh, this is good stuff.
There's one part of the story that I skipped over.
Uh-huh.
Let's about 2 weeks prior to my surgery, this second time here,
Yeah.
the surgeon ordered a cardiac cath procedure be done. And that is where they go in with a camera, usually through your groin artery. They can sometimes go through your wrist.
Yeah.
But they go in and look mainly at your coronary arteries to make sure that
ready.
everything looks good.
Yeah.
Because, if you got somebody's chest open and they need something done, that's the time to do it.
Yeah.
They prepped me for this procedure, had me in the actual room where they do the procedure. Everything's laid out on the tables beside the bed. The doctor walked in and came up to me and he said, "You do know that you have a dissection, right?" I said, "Yeah, of course I know that. I've had it for over 8 years." He goes, "And you have a large aneurysm right at the top of your heart." I go, "Yeah." He goes, "Why are we doing this cath procedure?" I said, "Well, I'm having surgery in a couple weeks, and I think she just wants to have a look at everything." He says, "I am not real comfortable with this." He said, and this doctor wasn't, he wasn't 30. He was probably in his 60s. And he said, "I just don't feel comfortable about this." He says, "I'd have to go into your wrist." And he said, "Therefore, to get into your aorta is a very difficult turn. This camera follows the wall of your arteries." He said, "So I get it in there." He says, "I don't know that I would ever be able to get a look at what she's wanting to see." He says, "I think I'm going to go ahead and abort this if that's okay." I said, "You're the doctor. You feel we need to abort it?" "Yeah, it's 100% okay by me." So we didn't think much of it. I mean, it was kind of something that's like, wow, I wonder how often they do that. And judging by the girls in the recovery room who wasn't sure what exactly I needed to do for recovery since I didn't have a procedure, I'd say it's not very often. So the first time I met with my general practitioner here in town, he says something that's kind of stuck with me. He says, "That was divine intervention. If he would have tried going in there with that camera as your vessel dissected with medicine," he says, "imagine if he would have hit it with a camera." He says, "You wouldn't have come off that table." And I'm like, he's right.
Yeah.
That thought crossed my mind, but I didn't dwell on it until he pointed it out to me. But
I knew that was God stepping in.
But
Yeah.
I mean,
I knew
just
God was
that's
stepping
at
in
least
on that.
3 times that my life has been spared. So obviously, I got to get this story out because, not that I don't want him to spare it again if necessary, but I just feel like it's important that.
Well, Paul, you have a shirt that says "All warriors have scars." Hashtag aortic dissection survivors.
Yes.
It just reminds me that his wounds bring our healing, and your scars brought your healing.
Exactly.
And now it's just, again, to see the testimony and what your testimony is going to bring in the lives of other people, the faith that it's going to build in so many people. So can I pray with you? We're going to end the conversation.
Certainly.
Absolutely.
Let's pray. God, we are grateful that you work through Paul and you work through the heart also of Angie. We are grateful that you had miracle upon miracle in his life. We're grateful that he sits across from me right now, full of life, a new believer, a born-again believer, and a man that is steady in his faith in you. God, we're grateful that you work in lives and you work in ways that we can't see and that we can just step back and say, amazing. God, you are an amazing God, and we thank you so much for Jesus. We thank you that you spoke to Paul and that you speak to us each and every day. Continue to be in his healing and be in his path. May he feel your presence daily. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right, Paul and Angie Kirk, I appreciate you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us. Yep.
And we're back to wrap up the Central Weekly. A big thank you to Paul and Angie Kirk.
Thank you, guys.
What a weekend. What a story. How has God moved in their life? He has done so in a big way. And I'm grateful to be a part of it in this small, tangible way of like God called him to tell the story. I just want to get as many people told of this story. I'm grateful to help with that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you're a big part of that platform. So, good job. Thank you, Paul and Angie, and thank you for Jared. Thank you, Jared, for facilitating the conversation, my friend.
So that's it for the body of believers.
T-Bob.
See
ya.
I'm anxious to get started with this next one. Now, the next 3 weeks at Central are going to be exciting because November's a chock full weekend. If you haven't seen what's going on around here at Central, you got to check out centralnow.com/events. All the things, Thanksgiving, you mentioned it in sermon, but the baptism and bonfires.
Right.
We're all getting pneumonia that night. It's going to be great.
Right.
But
You'll remember your
you're going to remember. But here's the thing. we've got a brand new series called Our Family 3. I said it right.
Right.
And it's 3 weeks. And in the middle of that, we're going to do Family Worship Weekend, one of the best weekends on the Central Calendar.
Totally agree.
Family Worship Weekend. You get to hear some great things. So we're going to have some guests coming in the Central Weekly. We've got a lot of new staff members, specifically in Kid Depot. I want to hear their story. So we're going to bring them into the Central Weekly. Let Katie and Macy, who you know a lot about Macy.
I do.
And your family. So I'm excited to hear that because I really don't know these ladies. And so I think some people are going to hear some testimonies again about how God has worked in their young lives already. So the next 3 weeks, I'm really excited about. So
Me too.
good. I'm glad. John, that's a wrap for 86.
Jared, good job.
Guess what's next week?
Come on, 87.
I know,
Hey.
right? 86 is a good year. That's the year I was born. So,
Oh, wow.
yep.
That's
It's food for thought.
awesome.
There you go. Do you think, last thought for you, do you think when we're around the Thanksgiving table in our 70s and 80s, they'll be like, wow, Grandpa, wow, he was born in the 20th century.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
You think we're going to be those folks?
Probably.
I think we will. It's
Yeah.
going to be weird. Everybody's in the 21st. Okay, that's all. Last thought. See you guys later. Bye.